Between 1871 and 1914, Europe experienced a period of massive prosperity. Trade was at an all-time high, electricity was lighting up major cities, and new railways connected countries that had been rivals for centuries. This era of growth led many to believe that a major conflict was no longer possible. The prevailing thought among the educated class was that European nations had become too civilized and economically interdependent to ever risk destroying their shared wealth in a war. But this surface-level stability hid a darker trend. Away from the trade hubs, every major power was locked in an aggressive arms race, and competition for overseas colonies was reaching a breaking point. This universal focus on expansion and progress created a dangerous blind spot. While technology and trade had modernized, the diplomatic protocols used to settle disputes remained slow and antiquated, leaving the continent without a functioning emergency brake. June 28, 1914, Sarajevo. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, arrived for an official visit that would change the trajectory of the century. A secret Serbian nationalist group had already positioned assassins along his route. Their first attempt failed when a bomb bounced off the back of the Archduke's car and exploded in the street, injuring bystanders but leaving the royal couple unharmed. Later that day, a confused driver made a wrong turn into a narrow side street. Realizing his mistake, he hit the brakes and stalled the engine directly in front of a small deli. Inside that deli was Gavrilo Princip, a 19-year-old assassin who had given up on the mission after the earlier failure. He looked out to see his target stalled just 5 feet away, stepped to the car, and fired 2 fatal shots. How did a local dispute in a corner of the Balkans and 2 bullets from a teenager directly mandate the deaths of 20 million people? The alliance system divided Europe into 2 armed blocs. Germany promised Austria-Hungary unconditional support to crush Serbia, triggering a massive chain reaction. Austria attacked Serbia, Russia mobilized, Germany declared war on Russia and France, then invaded Belgium, forcing Britain into the global conflict. These treaties were originally signed to deter war by making the cost of fighting too high. In reality, they functioned as a mechanized trap that legally mandated a global catastrophe. In August 1914, the public response was naive enthusiasm. Crowds cheered for departing soldiers, convinced the war would be over by Christmas. The cheering stopped at the Western Front, a 700-kilometer line of static trenches defined by mud, lice, and the constant smell of decay. Military strategy had failed to keep pace with technology. Generals ordered 19th century infantry charges into the direct path of 20th century industrial firepower, specifically the machine gun, which mowed down hundreds in seconds. On the battlefield, science was weaponized. Poison gas was released into the wind, sinking into the trenches and causing men to drown as their lungs filled with fluid in the open air. At the Battle of Verdun, 700,000 men were killed over 10 months for less than 10 miles of territory. At the Somme, the British suffered 57,000 casualties on the first day alone. Humanity had spent decades engineering the technology to build a modern world, only to instantly repurpose it into a mechanized meat grinder. By 1917, the strain broke the Russian Empire. Driven by mass starvation and military failure, a revolution led by Vladimir Lenin seized control, resulting in Russia's immediate exit from the war. As Russia collapsed, the United States finally entered the conflict. This brought a sudden surge of fresh troops and massive resources to a continent that was physically and financially exhausted. Germany's final spring offensive failed, leaving their military reserves empty and their home front in revolt. On November 11, 1918, the guns finally fell silent under an armistice. The cost reached 17 million dead. In just 4 years, the borders of the German, Austro-Hungarian, Russian, and Ottoman empires were entirely erased, replaced by a fragmented map of new, unstable nations. In 1919, the victorious nations drafted the Treaty of Versailles. The final document focused on stripping Germany of 13% of its territory and imposing massive financial reparations designed to cripple the nation's economy for generations. This forced humiliation and the war guilt clause created a deep national resentment in Germany. It provided the exact political fuel needed for a bitter former soldier named Adolf Hitler to justify a second, more destructive war. Beyond the politics, the war's truest legacy is found in fields like this. Millions of 19-year-olds were sacrificed for the pride of leaders who would never have to step foot in a trench themselves. A single wrong turn in Sarajevo led directly to these endless rows of white markers. Recognizing that specific sequence of failure is the only way to accurately weigh the promises of glory when modern leaders call for mobilization today.